Transfigured Gems Part 2. Recently dropped less than 24 hours ago. It's a lot of exciting information, a lot of confusing information, so I'm going to go through them, share my initial first impressions, and maybe consider some ideas I might have, or concerns. There are some concerns, including a gem that we are waiting for, or were waiting for, Forbidden Rite, which has given me concerns, many concerns. But I will try to keep the video condensed. I don't want to give you like a 2-3 hour video to listen to just to get my thoughts. I will try to go through it quickly. If I call them old gems or anything, I apologize that they are transfigured gems, but old habits die hard, and I am old, and I am planning to die hard. So, Earthquake of Amplification smashes the ground, dealing damage in an area and cracking the earth. The crack will erupt in a powerful aftershock after the duration. Mind you, though, cracks created before the first one has erupted will not generate their own aftershock. The stats themselves show that the aftershock is all the rage on this gem. So increasing the duration gives you massive more multipliers, which seem very sexy for ailments, for hits, for area of effect. But I don't think it's going to feel very good. I imagine the idea is that you just run around like whack-a-mole without the aftershock, hopefully killing all the stranglers of the trash, if you will. And then you hit the big aftershocks for the elites, the rares, the uniques, right? Like, I think that's the idea. But if you want to get the multiplier much, much higher, you have to increase the base duration with like a presumably skill duration or skill effect duration. But then you might find yourself in a position where you hit the boss. You have to wait for 6 seconds, 9 seconds, 12 seconds, depending on how you want to push it and how you can push it, to maybe one-shot it or to do a large chunk of damage. Is that really going to feel good? Maybe. It's not my cup of tea, but I would love to see some like massive one-shot builds with this. What was supposed to be my cup of tea, but has left me drier than Ethereal Knives of the Massacre, unfortunately, looks impressive, not so much. It's infuriating because if you look at TS, which has been a dominating skill, Tornado Shot, they get their stuff for free. We get punished. Because I was looking at EK Poison specifically because the support gem that I was going to rely on was not affecting ailments, now has been patched to affect ailments. And now EK Poison is going to rely a lot on Nimbus to get that sexy double dip. Now we do fire projectiles, but as I said, the damage might be good, like 949, 1423. But if you look at the base gem, which is the same damage, it unfortunately has a cast time of 0.6 currently live. And this transfigurated gem is slightly more, 0.75. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, admittedly, but it does have a negative effect if you plan to spam it, which it is supposed to do. So ultimately, it's going to be maybe pre-Nimbus. It's going to improve your clear, if that's what you're into. But ultimately, no matter what you're going to do, no matter if you're going to try to hit on hit builds, or if you're trying to do ailment builds with poison, you're going to want to get that Nimbus for that double hit. The only time you probably don't want to do that is if you play EK Ignite, I guess, because you can't stack multiple like knights on a single target without doing some other shenanigans after all. So for poison and hit, it's going to be Nimbus based anyway, so this is entirely useless. Explosive Concoction of Destruction buffed base crit by 2% from 6 to 8, which is massive. And then also 98% critical strike multiplier if charges were consumed from a Ruby Blast. This is possibly insane, for the record. The base version has less crit and goes more about Ignite on that last line there. But this could actually be really, really good for some people. Because, yeah, like the concoction skills are really good league starters. Especially the poison one. I personally don't like the way you have to aim it with GMP and volley. And it drives me up a wall. Oftentimes I miss more than I hit with those skills, but this might actually be really, really nice, especially since you have the overlap, you have the shotgun, and getting 98% crit multi and 2% base crit on top of the 6th starter crit, giving you a total of 8 base crit. This is going to be super easy to like scale into like respectable damage numbers on like acceptable, league starter gear. I think I expect people to hit millions, and with a little bit of investment, I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see numbers above 5 to 10 million with explosive concoction. So That's going to be quite interesting. They also were kind enough to make it so that reduced flash charges used was a thing now on the quality, I believe. So keep an eye on that if you like to throw glass around. Whoppa. Explosive trap of shrapnel. I think this is just a weaker version of the original explosive trap, because you want the small explosions to hit. And if I understand this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of correcting happening, I think it's less likely to have overlap because the base secondary radius is larger. And then the smaller radius, the smaller explosion radius, which I imagine are the following explosions, are smaller than the radius is big, which means that theoretically, if the target is not big enough or you're unlucky, then they could be exploding far enough away from another, making one hit but not the other, losing potential damage. That's unfortunate, because if you want to hit the maximum value of explosive trap, and the reason why it's so good, because of all the small explosions, you want to make sure that everything hits. But maybe it's fine. Maybe you can just do some crazy AoE scaling or reducing of the AoE scaling, and it will be fine with the overlap. But it should help with like clearing, so maybe it's like a gem swap. I don't know. I don't really play traps, so any trappers around? Speaking of, Oppenheimer, there you go. Giant explosive trap. So you're trading in many explosions for one big one. It does have some incredible added damage. It does have some wonderful flat. I'm not entirely sold on it, because the original trap, overall, if you can hit like, I think it's like 6 or 7 explosions, there's a break point. If you can hit reliably that on the same target, which most likely will be bosses, because explosive trap is pretty much used as a boss killing build, it might end up doing more damage, I guess, depending on how that scaling ultimately works out. So, but however, combine that with the fact that you're also dealing with less trap throwing speed, I don't know if that is worth the trade-off. Less trap throwing speed, less potential total damage done, but better scaling. I don't know. It could work out. I would probably stick with the original one, or maybe try some crazy with shrapnel. I don't know. Maybe there's some experienced trappers around that can enlighten me. Eye of Winter Finality. Fires 14 charged projectiles in a spiral when projectile ends. Which is interesting, because that means that you have to kind of gauge the distance correctly. Because the actual single eye projectile cannot damage the enemies. And the fires 14 charged projectiles at the spiral when the projectile ends. So it's really all about that end burst. If you feel spicy enough to go about doing that, by all means, pop off. I would feel uncomfortable, because even if you are good at timing that, the original version actually has 200% more damage by the time they dissipate, although less projectiles at the end. So I don't know how this turns out. We have to keep an eye on it. However, if you just want to have breezy clear, I guess, you can do Eye of Winter Transience, where the Eye of Winter, I believe, does actually do damage. The shard will damage enemies they impact, dealing cold damage. The eye cannot damage enemies, but they are continuously firing the shards at least. But yeah, you can also see that the bottom line, up to 15% more damage by the time they dissipate. So yeah, it's more a continuous, reliable source of damage, but it's less, and they have more projectile speed, which would imply better clear. Maybe this bonus in projectile speed can do some crazy Jun-grown cooking with the, what is it called? The Eye of Winter build he was messing around with. Could be fun. Projectile speed is a hell of a thing. It breaks my brain when I try to calculate anything with it. So let's talk instead about giant meteors coming down. This is gonna be cooked, because as you can see, it does not have a Firestorm limit. Firestorm typically has a limit. Base is 3. The other one has 10. Firestorm of Meteors does not have a limit. So you can just cast this over and over and over again. Cast on crit, trigger the hell out of it. Has a lot of flat damage. Incredible effectiveness of added damage as well. But it's still a meteor that has to come down and land, which is a bit of a delay, which might be problematic for fast-hitting minions. There's a particular map that comes to mind. So it could be problematic. We could also be having a lot of painful damage. Ward loop? Is that a thing we could do? Maybe some ward loop action? Who knows? However, Firestorm of Pelting I find far more appealing Because if you look at the damage and the impact every 0.15 seconds, and it lasts for 2 seconds, you can have up to 10 firestorms. That's a lot of firestorms that you can just keep active for 2 seconds. It's going to be very difficult to keep them active at any given time, because the cast time is 0.75. You can reduce that, so you're going to be able to cast 4 or 5 firestorms easily, which still leaves a bunch left. So the entire field is just going to be pelts coming down. This is going to be insane. If there's some crazy thing that's going to happen, it's going to be with Firestorm of Pelting. But even though they have been buffing Firestorm and have giving it transfigured gems right now, I don't think that Firestorm has ever gotten popular. It always just feels weird. Maybe this will change it. I certainly will keep an eye on the pelting, because that just seems like you can fill up screen after screen and just don't have to worry about aiming. You don't have to worry about anything, because everything just will die. Maybe like a rain of arrows, but better? Who knows? Flame Dash of Return. This requires a PhD, because not only do you get more maximum travel distance, which sounds sexy, but the Flame Dash repeats, but forces you to go back. So it's a travel skill that doesn't make you really travel. That's fun. Luckily enough, it doesn't have a blink tag anymore, so you can actually use it as a proper skill without invoking a cooldown. So that's very, very big. Incredible effectiveness of added damage. So I imagine that we might be seeing... I had a thought until I read the not used by totem. There were builds in the past where you had like Frostblink totem. Fire trap shenanigans, right? I thought originally that it might be possible, but they prevented that specifically. So it seems like, yeah, you're just going to move around with this. This is some kind of like support. I don't know. Are people going to use this as a primary skill? The damage numbers seem fine, but the fact that you have to repeat it, so you can't easily move forward, it's gonna feel very awkward. Even if the numbers end up being really, really good, I can't imagine people enjoying to play this unless they have some kind of like super ignite trick they can do to like one-shot bosses with it. But I don't think the numbers are good enough for that. No, I don't know. People do crazy things with movement skills. Let me know if there's anybody cooking anything, because that could be fun. Speaking of ignites, Flame Surge of Combusting, now allowing you to ignite enemies with this skill, as opposed to the original not allowing you to ignite. And then there's also a Burning Ground that occurs based on the ignite done. This could be interesting, because you can maybe pseudo double dip with the ignite and then also the Burning Ground. It does have a pretty effective +9, but that's base as well. You can only create Burning Ground once per second, so you're not going to fill up an entire screen. But yeah, the numbers seem fine. Maybe this could be someone's cup of tea. I think I will stay away from anything ignite-based. I'm more of a poison kind of guy. Flame Blast of Sality. Sality. Or as some people have been referring to it, celery. Because English is hard and vegetables are harder. Actually, no, easier, softer. Well, after you cook them, I suppose. Doesn't matter. Flame Blast is interesting because this is like a faster version of Flame Blast. It scales up a little faster, but doesn't have the phenomenal cap end, nor can ignite. So this is like a Flame Blast clear skill for hit-based mapping. Could be interesting. 3 maximum stages, has better radius per stage, no ignite. Could be interesting. Wow, I can't even speak. I've never really been too big of a fan of Flame Blast. The channel skill is a little sus. But Flame Blast of Contraction. Contractions are a hell of a thing to think about. This is insane. I know the effective added damage is wild, but essentially the longer you channel, the more godlike it becomes, but the longer you have to stand still. So maybe this is, maybe you put some prolif on this and you can do some crazy clear, but it just takes too long. So maybe you can like scale that cast time down from 0.2 to even lower to make it even faster. Maybe some totem action. Could we see some totems happening with this? Because it is a very long channel time. Plus 11 maximum stages, which I believe the plus 1 on top of the 10 comes from the quality. Plus 0.2 meters per stage, that's another 2 meters at max range. I mean, just do everything times 10, because we are not going to have easy quality on skill gems this league to begin with. So, but do everything times 10. 6,000 more spell damage at the end of it, or 6,600 depending on where you start counting with the plus 1 on it. And then, of course, 2,500 more damage with ailment. Can you imagine the prolif on that? It's got no part in the pun, but that's going to be hot. Speaking of the prolif, you also get the 50% chance to ignite enemies, which is very good. Makes it possible, feasible for anything that's not an elementalist. But I imagine most folk will go with elementalist on this. Wouldn't they? This feels very elementally to me. But I don't really play the witch that often anymore. Unless it's an occultist, because I'm edgy. Flicker Strike of Power. Raiders crying out. This is interesting, because not only do I think this is going to take over the Raider Flicker Strike, the base Flicker Strike based on Frenzy, but the fact that you can get power charges, which makes crits significantly easier to deal with, but also, and this is something that people haven't really thought about, you get to actually keep your Frenzy charges now. Because normally, you would maybe actually have to spend your Frenzy charges, and you might not always get them back very quickly. So you had like these inconsistencies in the Flicker Strike, until you had like some really, really good gear. Now you don't really care. You're going to keep that attack speed, you're going to keep the extra bonus damage, and as long as you are critting, which should be at least once every 2 hits, easily, especially with power charges in your build, come on. You're going to have a lot of power charge sustain. 30% increased critical strike chance per power charge. Yeah, I can see some crazy things happening here. We might even see, maybe I'm out of line here, some more variations of like cold flicker strike, freeze everybody to death while you're critting them to death. Would that be an assassin? Maybe. Flicker strike gives me headaches, so I never really look into it. But yes, I think a lot of people are very happy with this. Speaking of being happy about things, I'm not happy about this. This is the skill Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice. I thought this was going to be broken. I was so excited. Because it's like you take chaos damage on your energy shield and such. Okay, fine. We can, or you take chaos damage based on your energy shield. I thought, okay, we can do that. Chaos inoculation. My very first thought. And then I read the rest of the gem. The third line from the top, or fourth line if you account for the title. The cost. It's not mana. It's a bloody life. Which means chaos inoculation is not possible because you will only have 1 life and you will kill yourself. So I've been trying to like kind of brainstorm a little bit how to deal with this, but the 45 life scales out of control really, really quickly once you start adding support gems to it. So not only, and well, if you're taking a look at how fast the Forbidden Rite wants to cast, which is quite fast, you're going to have to look at like 500 to up to 1,000 potential life spent every second in an endgame build that you can't really reduce because it's not damage, it's the cost. On top of that, you also take damage based on your energy shield as chaos damage. And chaos goes through energy shield at a base level. So are you going to try to compensate that? Are you going to try to wear something that prevents chaos damage from going through energy shield altogether? I don't know how to combine those two. And not only that, you need to have enough energy shield to make it worth going over life. Which means, as far as my builds have gone, which roughly stack out at 5k life, I think I need about roughly around 3k energy shield to be able to break even, while also having enough life to be able to afford the costs and have enough to deal with max hits of chaos damage that may or may not go through my energy shield depending on how I set it up. I have been trying to find some tech, and we have found a way to sustain it, but the sacrifices we had to make the build not worth it. So I wonder if there perhaps might be other alternatives that are not cast on crit. Not cast on crit, because I know you could spin with the dagger and then get massive hit gain, hit healing on that, but like when it comes down to self-casting, I wonder if there's a way forward here. But otherwise, I'm just going to stick to the good old Forbidden Rite, and I'll take those life hits instead, as opposed to the maximum scaling here, because it does seem very potent. 40% of maximum energy shield. There's so much potential there if you can figure it out. There's so much damage behind that multiplier. I have not been able to figure it out. But once the POB is updated fully, they're pushing out updates. We might look further into it. Frost Bomb of Instability. This is the Frost Bomb you can use as an offensive skill. Looks good. I'm not really impressed with it too much. The delay is also kind of frustrating. But yeah, if you really like Frost Bomb and you want to use it as an offensive skill, as opposed to a debuff, you can now. If you want to have it as an additional nuke, you can do so as well. Very similar to the Earthquake of Amplification mechanic, where you scale more based on how long it has been around. A lot more damage with ailments. But it does have a cooldown of 4 seconds. So as opposed to being able to debuff with a cooldown, you can now just nuke with a cooldown. So it could be good for some additional bonus damage against tough rares, uniques, what have you, pinnacles. Other than that, I don't think Cold is going to be super exciting. This, at least Cold Dot is not going to be super exciting. There might be some Cold Snap attack that's happening, but we'll see. This had me for a loop. Frostblink of Wintry Blast. Remember Lightning Conduit? That does damage based on or bonus damage based on the shock present and such. Yeah, imagine that for Frost, but then with a movement skill. Blink is gone because it now has a cooldown. It does have some incredible damage numbers on it though, which is quite delightful, but it cannot inflict chill, but, a lot of buts here, bonus damage based on the chill. Removes chill after damaging. It's like the cold movement version of Lightning Conduit. Now, if you bring the cast time down, you can keep spamming this. There's no cooldown on it. The blink tag is gone. So maybe this might be really good for like an Ignite kind of ordeal, because people have played Frostblink Ignite with some success. So now seeing this with more potential damage on top of that, I can see that going out of control. I can see that being really, really good for like mapping, for just quick mapping and such. Although, admittedly, you have to bring that tough cast time down, though. Although, admittedly, now that I read the text again, no totem block, no mine block. Frostblink totems go brrr. Frostblink totems ignite. That sounds awful. Don't do that. That sounds awful. I don't know. I can definitely see some people memeing with this. And maybe it's not as memey as I think it will be. Who knows? Frozen Legion of Rallying. Yeah, this is just a faster Frozen Legion. The cooldown time is 0.3 with a max use of 5. So there's less max uses, so less potential burst after a while, but it's back up. It starts faster. So it's kind of like a skill you can just keep using, but it hits less hard when you do. That's pretty much what it is. It's fine. I don't think anybody is going to fundamentally tech this thing into their build, because the cast time is still awkward on a melee skill that uses your weapon. It's still, I don't know. It requires a specific kind of person, and I am not that person. Glacial Cascade of the Fissure. This is, I guess, supposed to be like a clear version of Glacial Cascade, because the normal one has like 4 bursts, and then the final burst hits harder. This doesn't have that, but has 8 bursts, so it should travel longer. So if you want to fill the entire screen up with like just a streak of cold, you can. But I do expect the damage to be less for bossing, but better for like just coverage and clearing maybe. Which might be useful for certain builds for sure. Maybe some Legion becomes more prevalent with Glacial Cascade. I don't expect people to flock to it though, but I'd love to see some action with it, because Glacial Cascade was one of the very first skills I played in this game. A very, very long time ago. I think it might even be the very first cold skill I played. Maybe. I don't know. I will keep an eye on it, but I don't expect people to fundamentally change their lives around it. It might be where mapping Glacial Cascade goes in, where bossing the original gem goes in. I feel like that's kind of what's going to happen a lot. A lot of these old gems have more of a focus on clearing or bossing, so it might seem if you have a specific gem that you like to use, like a 1-gem build, the old quality gem might help with mapping easier, so we might see some variation there happening. A lot more gem swapping potential. But aside from that, I'm not really getting my mind blown here. Glacial Hammer of Shattering. This is dumb. In a good way. Not only do you get the crit multi, which is part of the quality, if I'm not mistaken, but every 3rd successive strike is a critical strike. It's a guaranteed crit. guaranteed crit as opposed to a guaranteed freeze or freeze as if you have done much more damage, which is the base one. Everything else is pretty much the same. Same base damage, same added damage. But every third successive strike is a critical strike. Or, every third consecutive. Every third successive strike is a critical strike. I can't speak. I'm excited because if you are playing a Berserker and you go Blitz, reduced critical strike chance per Blitz charge, which doesn't matter because you have a guaranteed crit. So you can zoom really bloody fast and not suffer the consequences of Blitz, while still being able to strike with crit multi-scaled damage, or even not having to over-invest in crit to compensate for that loss of crit chance based on those Blitz charges. I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see some crazy things with this, especially if it's every third strike, so you get like successful scaling on Ruthless. Ruthless is every third strike. Now that every third strike is going to be Ruthless, and it's going to be a guaranteed crit, with a 40% crit multi built into the gem, you can see the numbers going insane. You can see this maybe some trauma action, who knows? We'll see what happens. Ground Slam of Earth Shaking. This is just the AoE version of Ground Slam. The regular version has more damage to close targets. So this is one of those gem swap situations. Besides that, it's like pretty much the same. But better angle. Lack of bonus damage against single targets. Gem swap? Maybe. You won't see me do it. Hex Blast of Contradiction. I like what they're trying to do here, but I don't think it's going to work unless you find a way to consistently benefit from those inverted inversions on the resistances. If that works. I don't know if it works or if you can do it consistently enough to make it worth it. Because it's going to be resisted by the highest resistance instead. Which is painful, but you do get more damage, 50% more damage compared to the base one. And you also have a chance to not remove a hex, but it's still 90%, so you still have to assume you will. But that doesn't change much. But yeah, you have a potential more damage path here if you can get those inversions right. Otherwise, you slap on an elemental weakness and maybe that will be enough. Because 50% more damage is a hell of a thing. Anyway, if you don't want to care about that, Hex Blast of Havoc. This seemed bad to me because it's less base damage and such. But you don't have to worry about your Hex being removed, supposedly. But it still benefits from Hexes being on it. You still get the AoE damage and hit. But more importantly, there's an important line missing. This spell casts time is added to its cooldown if triggered. It's gone here. So this might be the cast on crit version that could trigger so many times a second that it might make up for the losses of the additional more damage and such. It could be really, really good. Or maybe the self-cast version, because the cast time is 0.6, where on the regular gems it's 1 second. 1 second is typically conveyed, or at least solved with mines and such. But this is 0.6, which is very easy to work with. So this might be the self-cast or the cast on crit version. Cast while channeling, mayhaps. Keep an eye out on it. Because I don't like the mind gaming playstyle. It's too squishy for my liking. I'm more of a tanky kind of guy, right? But I do like Hex Blast. Felt really good. So we'll see. Holy Flame Totem of Ire. Imagine Holy Flame, but as opposed to a cone, it's a beam. The cast time is also slightly quicker, which I don't think is the same as the totem placement speed. So I believe it has slightly higher DPS, despite the damage per hit being quicker. And it just has a longer beam as opposed to the fanned, the triple beam that's kind of like a cone. This is just like a long Kamehameha thing. Just single target versus AoE. We can see it happen again, gem swap time. Ice Nova or Frostbolt, it's just Ice Nova. But it does more damage. If it does less damage compared to the regular Ice Nova, unless you cast it on Frostbolt, then it does more damage. So it's very specifically designed for that build. Ice Nova of Deep Freeze just seems like an oh shit button. If you want to freeze people around you. Aside from that, I'm not really impressed with it. Because if I wanted to do more damage with cold, I also have a higher chance to freeze to begin with. And if I scale it out of control, then doing more damage as if I try to freeze as if I have done more damage doesn't really matter because I'm already freezing everybody anyway. It feels more like a defensive option. Maybe I'm missing something here. 50% chance to freeze enemies does sound very, very good. So maybe it can enable things, or maybe it's just like trying to stop something from happening. I don't know. Maybe somebody smarter than me can inform me about this. But it doesn't really scream anything specific to me right now. But I haven't really played with it either. So Ice Spear of Splitting. This is phenomenal. Ice Spear is mostly a single target build. You slam this in, you can map like a mad lad. It's incredible. This is literally just AoE Ice Spear of Splitting, because it can also split against terrain, which is insane. It's wonderful. I did play a little cast on crit Ice Spear with Kinetic Blast last league. So if I had this one, I would have enjoyed mapping a lot more. Like, bossing was great, but mapping was a bit of a pain to me. This would have made mapping so much more fun, especially since it actually allows you to split on terrain as well by definition. Incredible alternative for mapping for Ice Spear enjoyers. Love that. Icicle Mine of Fanning. This just seems like an upgrade to me, but I'm admittedly not a trapping expert. But this seems like an upgrade to me. Slightly more added damage. You do get one less projectile, but this consecutive detonation sequence can give you more projectiles to begin with. And those projectiles will have slightly more damage. So it should be better than having slightly less damage, but one more projectile, if you have enough of a sequence set up. So I wonder if this is the bossing version, or if I just misread it. This is a weaker version, but a faster crit stacking opportunity. So maybe you can set this up to get like 500% bonus crit very quickly, and then use that for something different, maybe. Because the aura effect does also include the increased critical strike chance, I believe. That aura effect is not present on everything else, but it is present on the sabotage one. So this might be more of a utility type of thing that might enable some other burst to occur. Once again, I'm not a bit of a big fan of trapping. I'm not a big fan of mining. So we'll see how this mine works, because this specifically is a mine, but yeah, we'll see. Infernal Blow of Immolation. This was a mind bender, because yes, it's probably better for bossing. It's worse for clear, because you lose out on the max life body explosions that the Infernal Blow actually has, which is pretty good for like clearing maps. But then this has a better debuff scaling that, as opposed to applying on the enemy, apply you on yourself, and then you just detonate. So if you're standing on top of the boss, you do more damage as opposed to the original one. So this is a single target gain, but a clear loss. Although I imagine it would still clear fine. But yes, gem swap is what I'm thinking. Maybe I'm wrong. Lancing Steel of Spraying. This is interesting to me. I played an Inquisitor cast on crit with Lancing Steel a while back, a couple of leagues ago. One of the things I didn't like was like the Call of Steel constantly having to press to get a proper spray. There's no mention of consuming steel shards here. There's no mention of Call of Steel here. There's no mention of any of it. It's just mentioning a lot of projectiles, cast on crit. They all pierce, cast on crit. And they do less damage. We don't care, because we would be using cast on crit. So unless I misinterpret this gem, it's not going to do much by itself, but it's going to be very, very good for like those cast on crits build who don't want to use Cyclone or Kinetic Blast and want to actually have like this mini turret triggering it for them. Inquisitor, think Inquisitor with Energy Blade type things. Could be really, really fun. Was a good build. Mind you, the flask thing was a little annoying, but neither here nor there. Leap Slam of Groundbreaking. This is Leap Slam, but with better attack damage and effectiveness of added damage. So I guess we're going to see people Leap Slam as a 6th link now. Leap Slam memes. You just like jump on people and they die. It does have a 70% attack speed mod, which is like off base, which is a little... But other than that, it does have all the typical Leap Slam mods, full life, stun and all that. So, going to be supported by multi-strike item, which is to be expected. But other than that, 320 of base attack damage, 320 effectiveness of added damage. Could be good. We'll have to take a look at it if somebody's going to meme with that. It is the slam skill. So maybe Leap Slam of groundbreaking slam totems. I'm just putting it out there. Who knows? Lightning Conduits of the Heaven. Possibly wonderful, possibly awful. It's clearly the clear version of the Lightning Conduit build, because it doesn't have the shock scaling, but also doesn't have the requirements that the other skill has, or the limitations for cast on crit or triggering. So it does do more base damage, but doesn't have to have the additional more damage multiplier due to shock and all that. So you do end up losing a little ceiling, but the entry point is a lot easier. So this might be really, really good for cast on crit. It does have a last... the cast time is a little higher, 0.2 seconds higher. The base one is 0.5, but does require you to have shock on the enemies and such to really start popping off with it, or even for it to function. Let me actually take a quick look. I used to love Lightning Conduit so much. Lightning Conduit was great when it came out. And not because it was overpowered, but it was fun. Yeah, see, here it does have, cannot inflict shock. This spell cast time is added to its cooldown if triggered. So, and it also removes shock from enemies and strikes all shocked enemies. So you have to apply shock to it for it to work. This, no requirement for shock, no removal of shock, nothing shock. So you lose the complicated nature of Lightning Conduit, but you also lose the high end as a result of it, making it a lot easier for just simple mapping. The base damage is there, the added damage is fine, the base crit is still 6. This is going to be great for cast on crit, it's going to be great for cast time. Somebody mentioned as well that maybe you could use Lightning Conduit of the Heavens to apply the shock, and then cast Lightning Conduit for the massive shock hit removal. But that's like A-B playstyle, and no, I'm not into that. But maybe you could do something with like triggers and Mjolnir and who knows what else. Could be fun, who knows. Lightning Spire Trap of Zapping. This is the clear skill version of Lightning Spire Trap, because it doesn't have a cooldown. And does come with the chance to trigger an additional time, but overall it's just a weaker version. But it makes sense because it doesn't have a cooldown, so you can just keep throwing them if you can get that cast time down. Lightning Spire Trap of Overloading is curious. It does have a very long cooldown, time seconds, but it has a 100% crit chance. 100%. A decent amount of damage. Strikes 8 areas, but only strikes once a second compared to the alternatives, which are 0.4, 0.36, I believe, on the base one. So, big nuke, constant spam, and then we have the Lightning Spire Trap, which is kind of like a in the middle version of that. So you can choose your poison. Speaking of poison, Lightning Strike of Arcing is going to be interesting. I'm not sure if I understand how the 10% more damage per chain works, because the way I'm looking at it right now, it seems that the skill just gets 90% more damage directly from the get-go by having 9 chains. Is that how it works? Do you just get it from the get-go? Probably, right? Because it doesn't say with chains that are left, like it says on Arc, I believe. So, aside from that, hit for hit, it is going to be better to use Lightning Strike for Arc. But yeah, you do lose out on some projectiles, which of course could benefit massively from the returning. But the returning poison aspect was nerfed to now also affect poison, where it otherwise previously did not. So, if you can get some additional projectiles on this, it might just be better for not only single target, but also massively for clear, depending on how the chains scale the damage, which could be interesting because the return projectile gem is, of course, massively nerfed. I think it's like 61% less damage with hits and ailments now for the next league. So you still get like the 40% return bonus there, but can you not maybe find a different way to like scale damage? Because if we get like a better support gem instead of that, it might even be better. It probably still wins though. We'll have to find out if anybody goes Lightning Strike with the return projectiles. And if nothing else, I'm sure that people can get creative with other items. Lightning Tendrils of Eccentricity. Incredibly frustrating, because you have to now need to not only wait for 3 pulses, you have to wait for 6 pulses. The original is 3 for a guaranteed crit. Now the 6 here is the guaranteed crit, but also gives you 150 more area and 500 more damage with hit and ailment. 500. So wow, you can do some incredible scaling with this. I can imagine people using this for some insane, maybe some ailments and hits. But yeah, you have to channel 6 pulses, and it's like at a base level, it's 1 pulse every 0.23 seconds. So it's a little more than 4 pulses a second. So are you willing to constantly stand still with some cast time for like about a second as a channel skill? Maybe a bit more. For bosses, probably great. For mapping, it's probably going to feel a little awkward unless you do some like pro lifting maybe. I don't know. I would like to see, because every single time people play Lightning Tendrils, they're always surprised with how good it acts and performs. So to see that high end being potentially heightened, interesting. And then we also have the Lightning Tendrils of Escalation, which doesn't have the pulse, so no guaranteed crit, no bonus damage on that. But the longer you channel, the more clear you get. And the base damage, I believe, is much, much higher as well, like 1,000 higher on the high end there, pretty much. So you can get a lot more coverage, but you have less of a high ceiling. So this is like the clear version, and then this would be the bossing version. That's what it feels like to me. Gem swap, anybody? Pop off. Mirror Arrow of bombarding clones with Rain of Arrows. Rain of Arrows is kind of a weak skill, but having 3 minions that do 57% more damage that lasts for 20 seconds, constantly firing Rain of Arrows, could be good. Mirror Arrow of Prismatic, which is the same as the previous, but elemental hit. So the BA, MA builds, the Blink Arrow, Mirror Arrow builds are going to have some variety now. And then we have the Molten Strike of the Zenith, which to me sounds insane. Yes, it does require a 2-handed build, but look at those last couple of lines. The 50% less damage is base, but every 5th attack deals you fire 5 additional projectiles on top of the projectiles you would normally fire. That's 5 additional hits. And maybe even with like some return or Nimbus action, you can have some additional hits happening with that. There's some tech there that I'm not privy to, because I haven't really played around with it, but I know people are using it. And then also every 5th attack projectile deals 1,000 more damage. It's 200% more damage per strike on average. If you get everything to line up correctly, you're going to scale out of control with this. This is insane. This can't be normal. I'm not sure if this is just GGG just popping off, or if this speaks volumes about how bad melee is that they have to, or the skill itself is that they feel like it's okay and balanced as an alternative to add a modifier that says 1,000% more damage on top of 5 additional projectiles, and think that this is fine at the cost of a 2-handed limitation, because it does require a 2-handed melee weapon. But I think there's like a dancing, maybe some dancing blade action. Who knows? It seems insane to me. I can't wait for people to break the game with this. It's going to be lovely. It's going to be wonderful. Other than that, yeah, that's the second batch total. It did end up being a 43-minute video. Bloody hell. I do apologize. I did try to condense it as much often, but I just go off on tangents. So thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the background noise of a streamer popping off on some new information, hopefully you have your league starters. I'm still kind of putting mine together, but good luck at league start. If I don't catch you before that, take care. And yeah, I'm out.